It was a cloudy afternoon, the kind where the sky looked too tired to cry. A small crowd had gathered in a quiet cemetery, standing around a plain wooden coffin lowered halfway into the earth. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the occasional sniffle or rustle of dry leaves. Grief hung over everyone except him. He stood at the very back, just outside the circle of mourners. Tall, in his early 30s, wearing a black overcoat too clean for the occasion. A faint smirk danced at the corner of his lips, like the whole thing amused him. He wasn't family. No one knew his name. But somehow he showed up at nearly every funeral in the city, always alone, always on time, always smiling. His presence was cold, his smile unsettling. That day, as the priest began reading prayers, the guest stepped forward. One mourner, an old woman clutching her rosary, turned and stared. Her lips tightened. "Not again," she muttered. And then he did something strange. He chuckled. Soft, almost inaudible, but enough to ripple through the air like a shiver down the spine. Heads turned. The priest paused. The grieving brother clenched his fists. But before anyone could react, the man simply turned around and walked away. Calm, unbothered, like he'd seen something the others hadn't. As his figure faded into the fog, a boy from the crowd whispered, "He's cursed. Anyone he laughs at dies next." The murmurs returned. The fear settled deeper, but no one dared follow him. No one ever did. That night, rain finally fell. Slow, heavy drops tapped against the windows of a dimly lit apartment, where Zayan, the grieving brother from the funeral, sat on the edge of his bed. In his hands was a faded photograph of him and his younger brother, back when life was louder and laughter didn't echo with loss. He stared blankly, but his mind kept rewinding. The man, that laugh. It wasn't grief, it wasn't madness. It was something else, something wrong. Zayan reached for his phone and scrolled through the messages in the family group chat. That's when he noticed something strange. A message from his cousin Saad, just after the funeral. He was there again. The same guy from Aunt Farah's funeral, remember? Zayan's heart skipped. His thumb hovered. Then, typing, "Who is he? No one knows. Shows up, smiles, leaves. I thought I was overthinking it, but he's always there. Every time." The next morning, Zayan couldn't shake it off. He drove to the cemetery. The wet ground squelched beneath his shoes. He found the gravedigger, an old man with sunken eyes and hands that looked like they had buried centuries. "Do you know him?" Zayan asked, showing a screenshot of the man from a blurry funeral video. The old man didn't blink. "They call him Raheel," he murmured. "He's been coming here longer than I've been digging." "Why? Who is he?" The old man hesitated, then whispered like he was speaking to the dead themselves. "Some say he sees what's next, that he laughs when he knows another is marked." Zayan felt his spine stiffen. "Marked?" he repeated. The gravedigger pointed at the fresh grave behind him. "He smiled at him, didn't he?" Zayan went cold. He had. Just before the service of his aunt ended last month, his brother had looked up and seen the strange man, and a twitch of a smile had crossed his lips like he recognized something. But that was impossible. That night, Zayan couldn't sleep. He kept the lights on. Every creak in the apartment made his skin crawl. Then, at exactly 2:14 a.m., his phone buzzed. Private number. No message, no call log, just one image. A photo of Zayan himself taken that same day, at the cemetery, standing beside his brother's grave, and in the blurry corner of the photo, Raheel was standing behind him, smiling. Morning came, but it brought no relief. The world moved outside Zayan's window, vendors yelling, kids chasing each other, motorcycles roaring. But inside his apartment, it felt like time had stilled. The image from last night still sat open on his phone screen. He'd stared at it for hours, hoping it would somehow change, hoping that shadowy figure in the background wasn't real. But Raheel was there, and he was looking right at him. Zayan tried to rationalize. Maybe someone edited it. Maybe it's just someone messing with me. But in his gut, he knew better. A knock at the door startled him. He jumped, grabbing a heavy book off his desk as if it were a weapon. He crept toward the door and peered through the peephole. Sad. Zayan yanked it open. "Did you set that photo?" Saad frowned. "What photo?" Zayan handed him the phone. Saad stared. "I didn't even know you were at the cemetery yesterday." Zayan's chest tightened. "Then who took it?" The cousins sat at the kitchen table, both silent, the air between them heavy. Then Saad said something that made Zayan's blood freeze. "Remember Aunt Farah's funeral?" "I saw him then, too. But it's not just funerals. 2 days later, Uncle Arif died, heart attack. He hadn't even been sick. And then your brother died, too." Zayan stared. "I think this guy brings death," Saad said slowly. "And maybe." Zayan's mouth went dry. "Maybe what?" Saad met his eyes. "Maybe if he smiles at you, your time's already ticking." The room fell into silence, but then Saad added, his voice lower. "I know someone who might know more." Zayan's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "Her name's Mariam. She's not a psychic or anything. More like a researcher of weird stuff. She runs a blog, posts about patterns no one else sees. Superstitions that repeat through history. She even wrote about Raheel once." Zayan felt torn. Every part of him wanted to run in the other direction to pretend this was all coincidence. But curiosity had already begun to eat at his fear. "Let's go," he said. They drove out of the city away from the noise, the safety, and the ordinary. Mariam lived in a rundown house at the edge of a dying forest. The trees leaned over, like they were trying to whisper warnings to anyone who passed. She opened the door before they knocked. "I was expecting you," she said, turning back inside without waiting. Zayan and Said exchanged glances and followed her in. The house smelled of old books and something faintly metallic. On her walls were photographs, grainy, black and white pictures of people at funerals, standing in groups. And in nearly every one of them, Raheel was present, standing still, watching. Sometimes in a corner, sometimes in the back. "Is it real?" Zayan asked. "Who is he?" Mariam sat down, her voice calm, but her eyes haunted. "I don't know what he is, but I know this. He's been around for decades, maybe longer. No one knows where he comes from. He appears when someone's about to die." Saad leaned forward. "So what? He's like the Grim Reaper?" "No," she said. "Worse." Zayan's throat tightened. "Why worse?" Mariam didn't answer at first. Then she finally said, "Because he doesn't just take the dying. Sometimes he marks a living, and then watches." Zayan's mind raced. "Marked?" That's what the gravedigger had said. "So what happens after he marks someone?" Zayan whispered. Mariam stood up and walked to a dusty drawer. She pulled out a yellowed page, an old newspaper clipping. It was from the 1960s. The headline read, "Mysterious Deaths Plague Village. Eyewitness Claims, Man Who Smiled at Funerals, Seen at Every Scene." Zayan stared. "Once you've been marked," Mariam said softly, "he gives you 3 warnings." Zayan turned. "What kind of warnings?" "Unexplainable events, disturbances, shadows, reflections that don't match. It's not random, it's a countdown." Saad's voice shook. "And what if someone ignores them?" Mariam's face hardened. "They die." Zayan's stomach turned. "Has anyone ever survived?" he asked. Mariam hesitated. "One man," she said. "But he vanished. The last message he ever sent said this." The man laughed again, but this time I laughed back. Zayan didn't speak on the drive back. The city skyline looked smaller now, less comforting. Every person they passed looked like they were hiding something, or maybe watching. Mariel's words echoed in his mind. 3 warnings, a countdown, and he couldn't shake that last line. The man laughed again, but this time I laughed back. What did it need? As night fell, Zayan sat alone in his apartment, lights dimmed. Sayat had offered to stay the night, but Zayan refused. He needed space to think, to breathe. But silence was a dangerous thing now. A light flickered in the kitchen, even though the ball was new. Then came the sound fade, like someone dragging their fingernails across the hallway wall. He held his breath. The sound stopped. He slowly stepped toward the hall, heart pounding. Nothing. But as he turned to head back, he froze. A small mirror on the wall reflected a man standing behind him. But when Zayan turned, there was no one there. His pulse thundered in his ears. He looked back at the mirror. It was empty again. Just his own reflection. No man, no smile. First warning. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Zayan showed up at Saad's doorstep, pale and shaky. He told him everything, what he'd seen, what he felt. Saad believed him instantly. "We have to stop this," Zayd said. "There has to be a way." Saad was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe it's like Mariam said. If he gives 3 warnings, maybe the only way to survive is to face him before the 3rd. Zayd looked up. "How?" "Let's go back to where it started." Zayd blinked. "The cemetery." Saad nodded. That evening, just before sunset, they returned. The graveyard looked even more sinister now. The light hit the tombstones at strange angles, casting shadows that felt too long, too alive. They walked in silence until they reached his brother's grave. The earth looked different, not freshly dug, but disturbed. Saad crouched down. "Wasn't there a flower pot here?" Zayan didn't answer. He couldn't stop staring at the grave. Suddenly, a gust of cold wind rushed past them, carrying with it the faintest sound, a whisper, low, raspy, like the earth itself was speaking. They froze. Zayan turned. There, near a distant tree, stood a man in black, his head tilted, hands calmly at his sides, watching. Then he smiled. Zayan's body went rigid, that same faint smile. Distant and empty, no warmth, no emotion, like he wasn't smiling at him. He was smiling because of him. Then the man vanished. Gone, as if he'd never been there. Saad looked at Zayan. "Second warning." Zayan didn't answer. He was trembling. They rushed back to the car, neither of them saying a word the entire drive home. But something had changed. The air around Zayan felt heavier now, like something was clinging to him. That night, he laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, too afraid to blink, until he heard it again. Laughter. Low, hollow, right outside his window. He forced himself to look. There was nothing. But as he turned back, something caught his eye. On the fogged-up glass of his bedroom mirror there was written, "One more." The next day, Zayan didn't go to work, didn't answer calls, didn't even change clothes. He sat on the edge of Saad's couch, hands clasped, eyes fixed on nothing. "2 warnings," he whispered. "1 left." Syed handed him a glass of water, trying to keep calm, but the tension in his jaw betrayed him. "We need to act before the 3rd. Whatever it is, it's close." Zayan didn't blink. "Every time he appears, he gets closer." Saad opened his laptop and began researching again. His screen filled with cemeteries, legends, whispers from forums. Most sounded like nonsense, except one. A post from a private grief support group, 3 years old. "He came to my sister's funeral, then smiled at me a week later. I saw him again on a bus. He just stood there, watching. For the 3rd time, I blacked out. Woke up in a hospital with burn marks on my arm. They said it was a panic attack. But he hasn't come since. I think I beat him to it." Sayed's eyes narrowed. "Maybe there's a pattern. If you confront the fear before he delivers the final warning, maybe that resets the cycle." Zayan stood. "You want me to scare the thing that's haunting me?" Saad shut the laptop. "No, I want you to be ready." That night Zayan didn't go home. He and Saad stayed at an old roadside motel. thinking they could outrun a ghost by changing locations. At 3:11 a.m., Zayan sat up, gasping. No noise, no vision. But something felt off. He walked to the motel's tiny bathroom. He opened the door slowly, just the hallway light flickering. Saad stepped out of bed. You okay? Zayan nodded, but his heart felt like it was unraveling. Back in bed, he stared at the ceiling, not sleeping. And then the phone rang. Not his, not Saad's. The motel landline. Zayan picked it up, with his fingers shaking. There was no voice, just breathing. Then he heard a whisper. It's almost time. Click. The line went dead. The next morning, they returned to Mariam. Zayan demanded answers. You said he gives 3 warnings. You knew what was coming. What did you mean when you said I laughed back? Mariam looked at him, eyes darker than before. I laughed because I realized fear is how he gets in. Zayan leaned in. And if you stop fearing? Mariam hesitated. Then maybe he doesn't win. Zayan stood, resolve hardening. Then I'm not running anymore. On returning home, Zayan saw something, a fresh flower pot placed outside his house, one they hadn't seen before. A black flower bloomed in it, not plastic, real. And tied to the stem, a note written in jagged handwriting. Tomorrow. Zayan's clock was ticking. Only one warning left, and now he knew when. The flower was dead by sunrise. Zayan found it slumped in its pot, the black petals now brittle as ash. The note was still there, but the word tomorrow had bled into the paper like a wound. He didn't tell Saad. Instead, he drove to the cemetery alone. The gates were locked. He climbed them anyway. His brother's grave looked smaller in the gray light. The dirt was still fresh, but something about it felt disturbed, like fingers had pushed through from below. Zayan knelt. A sound behind him, not footsteps, something dragging. He turned slowly. Raheel stood 10 feet away, his coat flapping in a wind Zayan couldn't feel. His smile stretched wider than before, lips cracking at the edges. You're early, Zayan said. His voice didn't shake. He'd run out of fear somewhere between the second warning and this moment. Raheel's head cocked to the side. You're late. A gust of wind sent dead leaves skittering across the ground. When they settled, Raheel was not there. Zayan stood at the center of the cemetery, a flashlight in one hand, his brother's old switchblade in the other. The air smelled of wet earth and something metallic, like blood before it dries. The wind died. Even the crickets went silent. His eyes were searching for Raheel when he heard a whisper from behind his ear. You should have run. Zayan spun, slashing blindly with the blade. It cut through empty air. Raheel stood 10 paces away, his smile now stretched ear to ear, his eyes black pits. That's not how this works, he chuckled. The sound wasn't human, more like glass breaking underwater. Zayan's breath came in ragged gasps. He remembered Mariam's words. Fear feeds him. So he did the only thing left. He laughed, not a nervous giggle, a full, belly-deep roar that echoed between the headstones. Raheel's grin faltered. You think that's enough? He hissed, taking a step forward. Zayan kept laughing, even as his vision blurred, even as Raheel's form began to twist, his limbs elongating like shadows at dusk. The knife trembled in Zayan's hand as midnight choked the cemetery. Raheel stood before him, his smile now splitting his face like a crack in porcelain. You can't win, he whispered for the first time. His voice wavered. Zayan thought of his brother's last smile, of the black flower, of every funeral Raheel had ever ruined. I don't need to win, Zayan said. I just need you to lose. He lunged not at Raheel, but into his shadow. The world twisted. Suddenly, Zayan saw it. The chain around Raheel's neck, hidden beneath his coat. A tiny silver hourglass, its sand nearly drained. Raheel's eyes widened. No! Zayan smashed it with the knife. The scream wasn't human. Raheel's body collapsed, his coat crumpling empty to the ground. The wind died mid-howl, and then everything went silent. Zayan knelt, gasping. The hourglass shards glittered in the moonlight. Gone. At dawn, Saad found him asleep against his brother's grave, the switchblade still clutched in his hand. "It's over," Zayan murmured when he woke, and for the first time in months the weight in his chest was gone. Raheel's powers came from the hourglass hidden beneath his coat, and it was his greatest weakness too. When Zayan shattered it, everything ended. The curse, the laughter, the darkness, all of it gone. Zayan's bravery saved everyone from Raheel's curse, and ultimately, he got rid of him forever. Thank you so much for watching. If you got to this point, please give this video a thumbs up. It will help grow my small YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet to my YouTube channel, please do subscribe and turn on post notifications so you get notified whenever I post more interesting contents like this. Till then, goodbye and take care.